We are live from the Vulture's Nest. You already know who it is. My name is Mike Kyle, aka the Fantasy Vulture. I have over a decade worth of fantasy football experience, and I've continuously competed for fantasy championships over the course of the past 6 seasons. But enough of me, I'm here for you. On today's episode of the FB Show, we're going to continue our All-32 NFL team preview series, breaking down each team through the lens of fantasy football. Up next, we got my own team, the Carolina Panthers, as we continue the NFC South. But before we get started, I need a few quick things from you. First off, smash that subscribe button, power running back style so you never miss a video, and also hit the like button like an open receiver downfield so you always can show your support for the channel and for this video on its own. And finally, shoot me a text, 330-302-1554. Any kind of fantasy football question that you have, or if you need advice, which player you need to draft, or which trade offer you should accept, let me know there and I'll be sure to get back to you. It's going to be a damn good time over on my text messaging platform over there. But let's get right into it. We knocked out the Falcons already, and we did the Saints. Now it's time to do my own team, the Carolina Panthers, and this team is interesting. There's a lot of different pieces here that could go one way, or they could go the complete opposite direction, and that has me very intrigued overall, but that might scare a few people off. But let's just jump right into it, shall we? We're going to start where we always start, and that's at the quarterback position, and the Carolina Panthers have a brand new quarterback for the first time in, I think it's been, 9 years, 8 years? And that is Teddy Bridgewater comes in to replace Cam Newton. And there's been a lot of thoughts and talks surrounding this because this was a big move. Cam Newton was the face of the franchise, and they kind of just kicked him out the door in a very lackluster way, shall we say. It wasn't ceremonious or anything. It was just kind of like, bye, see you, we don't want you anymore. And that's a tough pill to swallow for diehard Panthers fans. But I'm kind of excited, quote-unquote, about Teddy Bridgewater because I understand where the organization was coming from in regards to it. With this new regime, they just needed someone who can steady the ship for now. And with Cam Newton, even though how great he is, I mean, my nickname for him is the Fantasy King because every single time he's on the field, he puts up a top 5 finish. In this organization and the direction that they need to go in, they just needed someone who can just kind of keep the boat level. And with Cam Newton's health, as far as recently, you never knew what you were going to get out of the quarterback position, which is the most important position in football. So I understand the move that they made, and I think there's a world where Teddy Bridgewater can still finish pretty high as a fantasy quarterback, given the weapon that he has. But let's go over Bridgewater from last year. And the majority of his games, it does say 10 games played, but that's obviously kind of impacting the games where he took over in the fourth quarter. Obviously, he did have a stretch of games there where he did start in place of Drew Brees. But let's just go through this. So his QB finish for 2019 was QB 32. Once again, you really don't want to focus on that number. And even the adjusted score, I don't know how much stock you want to put into it because that also gets skewed a bit as well. But when he was a starter, essentially, he had 1 game as a QB1, 3 games as a QB2, and 4 games as a QB3. Let's see if that makes sense here. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, yes. So that all kind of ties in together. One of the QB3 games was when he took over for Brees due to injury, and then from the injured game since he took over as a starter, should I say, it was QB2, QB3, QB1, QB2, QB2, and then QB3 as well. So that's kind of the timeline. And then week 17, I don't remember off the top of my head if he started. I can look here. Yeah. Drew Brees started the game. Drew Brees finished as a quarterback 1 that week, and then Bridgewater took over late in the game. So his numbers are kind of skewed in that way. And what I probably should have done, and I didn't think about this until just this moment, is I should have really just focused in on the 5 games where he started. So I apologize for that. But we can still kind of take some data from the past season and apply it to this Panthers team. So I'm really focused on that QB2 number because that's when he was really the starter, and all 3 of his performances came from there. And then there was the QB1 finish. So Teddy Bridgewater can be a competent starter in the NFL. I just don't know if it translates well into fantasy because of his play style. He doesn't throw deep a lot, and these are all probably arguments that you've heard before about Bridgewater. But what he does do is he does provide a sense of accuracy and a lot of, what's the right word? There is also some hesitancy to make those risky throws. So you're going to get a very accurate quarterback, which I think just boosts the wide receiver core more than anything. But he does have the weapons here. So let's just go over the 2019 stats. I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place here, but Teddy Bridgewater is kind of an enigma for fantasy football, and I'm not entirely sure how to break him down, and we're going to jump into that with the rank and ADP later on as in this preview. But going to his 2019 stats, he had 196 pass attempts, 133 completions, threw for over 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and the adjusted score, we're also not going to focus in on that. So we can probably disregard the 2019 finish and the adjusted score. With Bridgewater, he has the option to throw to Christian McCaffrey, who can easily catch over 100 passes, especially because Bridgewater does like to dump the ball off quick for like little quick routes there. Same thing with DJ Moore. And then he has multiple deep threats and Robby Anderson and Curtis Samuel if he decides to throw deep. But those first two names are really what's going to create Bridgewater's floor. And there are 3 quarterbacks that I kind of don't know what to do with because I see them all in the same light. And that is why I have Bridgewater ranked at quarterback 25. I just don't know what this offense looks like. We have a brand new everything essentially for this team. New quarterback, new coaches, new offensive coordinators. So I'm not sure what this team is going to look like. And that's why I have everybody dialed back. But I see the potential for this team in that way. So I have Teddy Bridgewater ranked at quarterback 25. And there are 3 quarterbacks here that I kind of see in the same light. And that's Bridgewater, Derek Carr, and Jimmy G. All 3 are just very much game managers. And I don't know how much upside they actually have. And that's what worries me. But there is like you are going to get games where they do play really well. I'm just not sure what games those are going to be. They all basically have series of weapons, with Jimmy G probably being the third rung on that as far as weaponry goes. Derek Carr has some players up there, especially with their new wide receiving core that they basically just drafted and they just came from the seat that they just came into this season. And Bridgewater's ADP feels kind of similarly to where I have them. Quarterback 23, so just inside of QB2 at 14.01. So you're getting him pretty much in like one of the last rounds of your draft. And if you want to take a flyer there, like if you were thinking, oh, I'm going to take a dart throw on Teddy Bridgewater, and if that doesn't work, I'm just going to stream the position afterwards, I'm totally cool with that. But here's the issue, right? The issue is quarterback 23. Like, there are so many other guys that you would probably rather have. I'm going to pull up the ADP right now. So I'm just going to read off some names here, and you let me know in the comments section down below, or you can tweet me at FFVulture, who you would rather have over Teddy Bridgewater. So these are all players that are going ahead of him that I feel like you might draft over. So Jared Goff, Teddy Bridgewater. I lean Jared Goff, no question. I know he's going to throw the ball a ton, and he's got the weapons to make plays for him. Ben Roethlisberger, coming off of injury, I think that's an interesting conversation, but I'd probably lean Big Ben too, just because kind of the same argument as Jared Goff. He's going to throw the ball a ton. Yes, they have a good defense, but Big Ben usually always puts up numbers for fantasy. Ryan Tannehill versus Teddy Bridgewater. Now, that's an interesting conversation because I think the weapons in Carolina are probably better than they are in Tennessee, and I think you can make the case for Bridgewater over Tannehill there. Jimmy G over Bridgewater, as I just said, I have Bridgewater 2 spots higher than Jimmy G. Cam over Bridgewater, now that just feels stupid. Although I'm not entirely sure what to do with Cam Newton this year in fantasy, and that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. And then lastly, Phillip Rivers over Teddy Bridgewater. Actually, Rivers is going behind Bridgewater. I would rather have Rivers and Drew Lock, and Drew Lock is also going 2 spots behind Bridgewater, and I have Drew Lock 1 slot ahead of Teddy. So looking at this, as far as the ADP goes, everyone's kind of in like the same ballpark, and it's really just a matter of preference and what you think is going to happen. Like I said, there is a world where Teddy Bridgewater, I think That's the thing. I don't know what the upside for Bridgewater is. I don't think it's a top 12 quarterback. I think it's probably top 15, closer to 15 than anything else. So just in the a middling QB2. And so I am just projecting, though. I don't know how this is going to work in Carolina. And that's what scares the hell out of me, I'm going to be honest. And that's just how I see Bridgewater. I know this wasn't the best analysis, all things considered. But like I said, Bridgewater's an enigma. And I fully recognize that, and that's why he's such a hard player to gauge for me right this moment. But let's move on to somebody who isn't hard to gauge, and that is Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey is an absolute fantasy monster for so many different reasons, right? And that's because not only does he run the ball like crazy, he also catches the ball like crazy, as we're looking at these 2019 stats. 287 carries, 116 receptions, 1,300 rushing yards, 1,000 receiving yards, and 19 touchdowns. If you had Christian McCaffrey last season, you probably won your league. He was that good. You look at the weekly finishes, 14 finishes as a running back 1 finish as a running back 2, and he did not have a running back 3 finish, but he did have a running back 4 finish, and I believe it was week 2. That was the only game that he busted for you last season. And all because of that, you already know he finished as the number 1 running back overall in both standard and PPR. When you do the adjusted score, it doesn't matter because he was still number 1 there. And the ADP for both him and myself is running back 1 at the 101 slot. There's really not a whole lot to say, right? Christian McCaffrey is one of those players who is a generational talent, not only for the NFL, but also for fantasy football, because what he does in real life translates so well into fantasy with both his pass catching ability and his rushing ability as well. So no matter what, he's game script proof. No matter if they are up by 10 or if they're down by 30, Christian McCaffrey is going to be on the field. And there's been a lot of talk around maybe Christian's workload being reduced because it was so heavily used last season. So they do have a backup running back, Reggie Bonifon, on the team, but they also just signed McCaffrey to a monster extension this offseason. And so I don't know how much his workload is going to actually be reduced because of that. You just paid this guy a ton of money. I think it was $16 million a year. And so you're going to use him. There's no reason to use Reggie Bonifon unless Christian McCaffrey just needs a play or 2 off. And I forget the exact number, but there was an extensive series where Christian McCaffrey did not miss a snap. He was that durable and that healthy. And I think that kind of continues just because I think they are kind of smart in how they use him. I understand they do give him the ball a lot, and that's great for fantasy. But also, he's not a guy he's not like a power contact runner. He's not going to run through guys. He's very, what's the right word? He's very swift and shifty in his play style. I don't think there's much else to say for Christian McCaffrey, I'm going to be honest. I think that's it. You know what to do. You have the first pick, you draft him. And if you don't have the first pick, you're not going to get him. It's kind of that obvious. And if he does fall for whatever reason to that second pick, you then should take him there no matter what. There's no debate here. There is no debate here. All right, let's move on. We're now going to talk about DJ Moore, one of my favorite players in the NFL. There's been a lot of graphics going around of who is this player with the production meter all the way up, the talent meter all the way up, and then the recognition bar is all the way down. And I said it's DJ Moore. DJ Moore was so good last year, despite having awful quarterback play to deal with. And I think with Bridgewater, that's going to be elevated just even a step further. Because if he can do what he did last season with Kyle Allen and Will Grier, what can he do with Teddy Bridgewater, a guy who loves to throw short slants, short routes, and DJ Moore just has the natural ability to make plays as well as with Teddy's accuracy. So DJ Moore's 2019 finish, he was wide receiver 21 in standard and wide receiver 18 in PPR. He had 135 targets, 85 catches, 1,100 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. That's the number I want to look at, 4 touchdowns. Because DJ Moore, no matter what, is going to get 1,100 receiving yards again, most likely. Definitely over 1,000. It might even be, it would not shock me if that number was 1,200 or even higher than that. But the touchdowns is what I want to focus on because this Panthers offense was so eye-gougingly bad last year that number has to go up. There is no way that with an improved quarterback play, DJ Moore only scores 4 touchdowns. It's just not possible. So I think that number goes up probably to 6 or 7, and even still, that's still an additional 21 points for a guy who finished last season as a middle wide receiver 2. So let's just talk about the weekly finishes here, right? He had 2 games as a wide receiver 1, 6 games as a wide receiver 2, and 3 games as a wide receiver 3. He was super consistent for you last season. There was a standard floor pretty much of essentially 10 points. He was going to catch 5 to 6 passes, and he was going to rack up 60 to 80 yards, and that was perfect for you just to get a consistent basis every single game. And then obviously there was touchdown upside, but that never came to fruition due to the offense. If we look at the adjusted score, 12.5 points per game. He played 15 games, super durable guy. New finish is wide receiver 20. So he does kind of fall back a little bit there just in the adjusted score, but I'm not entirely worried about that. I still think DJ Moore is just going to be a really, really good fantasy player this year, and somebody who I think is a little bit undervalued when you look at the ADP. So his ADP is wide receiver 17 going in the 4th round, right in the middle of the 4th essentially, and I have him ranked at wide receiver 16. I love DJ Moore this year, if you can't tell by the energy in my voice as I'm talking about him. I just think this Carolina Panthers offense takes a step forward with Teddy, and then ultimately DJ is going to be a beneficiary of that, and just because quarterback play, as you all know, matters so much for receivers, and it's always an interesting discussion, right? What comes first, a good receiver or a good quarterback? Who makes who better? And the answer is kind of both, right? And because of that, we have such a talented wide receiver already. Now let's give him somewhat of an average quarterback, and let's see what happens even in the slightest there. So that's my take on DJ Moore. Love him in the 4th round. If honestly, and this is what I'll say, if I started off my draft running back, if I wanted to load up on running backs early, I wouldn't hate DJ Moore as my wide receiver 1. Because as I've mentioned in my mock draft that I uploaded earlier today, you can check that. There'll be a link right above in the right-hand corner if you want to check that out. The wide receiver pool is always 4 times deeper than running backs because there are so many of them. So if you want to load up on running backs early and you want to take maybe DJ Moore and another wide receiver at the 4-5, would that make sense? Yeah, at the 4-5 turn, I wouldn't hate that at all. But let's move on to two sets of players here, or I guess not two sets, but two players here who I'm very fascinated by. And the first one is going to be Robby Anderson. And the reason why Robby Anderson and Curtis Samuel, spoiler alert, the reason why they're interesting is because these two guys for me are identical players, and I don't know what to do with either of them. Like I said, this Carolina Panthers offense has the potential to be very good because of the pieces that they have. They have a lot of talented guys. I just don't know how well it's all going to gel together besides Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore. So we have Robby Anderson, who was a member of the New York Jets and signed inside a free agency contract with the Carolina Panthers this offseason. So Robby Anderson is this person in fantasy. What's the right word? What's the right analogy for Robby Anderson? Robby Anderson is the player that we all want to find consistency in, and we all want the breakout to come, but it never has fully materialized yet. He's just this guy that we keep hyping up, and maybe there's something. We can see it. We see the spurts, and it ultimately kind of falls apart during the season. So last year, Robby Anderson finished at wide receiver 38 and 39 in standard and PPR. He had 96 targets, 52 catches, 779 yards, and 5 touchdowns. The adjusted score does not do him any favors, with the points per game being 8.5 rather, 16 games played and a new finish of wide receiver 53. Yeah, so Robby Anderson really was not too great for you last season. But then you look at the weekly finishes, he was fine as a wide receiver 2 with 6 games in that range, 2 games as a wide receiver 1, 3 games as a wide receiver 3. So Robby Anderson was kind of just all over the place last year, essentially. I'm going to pull up, I'm going to pull up his game finishes right now. I'm gonna, 1 second. Let's see, text that contains. Oops. What is happening here? All right, now we can go. I apologize for that. Let's see, text that contains. Look, when you have a massive Excel sheet that has every single player data in it, it's hard to find guys sometimes. All right, so Robby Anderson was even still. Wait a second, that's not even right. That's not even right. Did I just skip Robby Anderson altogether? Is that what happened? Give me a sec. Wait, I'm going to pull up DJ Moore. There's DJ Moore. There's Curtis Samuel. So I definitely just skipped Robby Anderson altogether on my profile, and I apologize for that. But hey, this is why we make mistakes, right? Mistakes happen. It's cool. So I can quickly just tell you what happened instead of this. The stats are correct, just the weekly finishes were not. So Robby Anderson did have 2 games as a wide receiver 1. He had 2 games as a wide receiver 2, and he had 2 games as a wide receiver 3. So like I said, Robby Anderson was not good last season, and the adjusted score proves that. I apologize for getting the weekly finishes wrong. That's on me. But regardless, it doesn't change the narrative that I've said earlier, that I said when I started talking about him. We keep wanting him to break out, and he hasn't yet. Now, whether that is due to quarterback play and guys are just missing him open downfield, or the fact that he's kind of just a one-trick pony, hey, go deep and run faster than everybody, we're going to try and get you the ball. I don't know how well that translates to this offense because Teddy Bridgewater's refusal to throw the ball deep, or lack thereof. It's not that he can't do it, it's that he won't do it. Just because he is such a conservative quarterback. So I don't know what Robby Anderson translates to this season, and that's why my ranking for him is wide receiver 54, because honestly, I'm not going to bother touching him. He's not a guy that interests me because his offense does not really revolve around what he does best. And then his ADP is kind of very similarly. Actually, his ADP is actually 9 spots higher than what I have him at wide receiver 45. I'm going to throw out some names that are going behind Robby Anderson, that are going behind and after Robby Anderson to let you decide who you would rather have. So going behind Robby Anderson right now is Sammy Watkins, Deontay Johnson, CeeDee Lamb, Jamison Crowder, Golden Tate, Anthony Miller, Jerry Jeudy, Djax, Alan Lazard, Tyrell Williams, Henry Ruggs, Curtis Samuel, Preston Williams, N'Keal Harry, Justin Jefferson. Basically the rookies. So if you would rather have one of the rookies over Robby Anderson, you're going to be able to get them. If you would rather have Sammy Watkins and a piece of the Chiefs offense, you can get him instead. Deontay Johnson, a lot of people are hyping him up this offseason. You could get him. So to me, I would rather have probably nearly all of those guys than Robby Anderson, because Robby Anderson's play style, simply put, does not fit this Carolina Panthers offense as I perceive it. And similarly, in that same vein, we are going to talk about Curtis Samuel here. And this makes me sad because I am a Curtis Samuel Dynasty owner, and I don't know what to do with Curtis Samuel at all. So Curtis Samuel, 2019 finish, wide receiver 36 is across the board in both standard and PPR. He averaged 9 points per game, on 16 games played. His new finish was wide receiver 48. His weekly finish, he had 1 game as a wide receiver 1, 5 games as a wide receiver 2, and 1 game as a wide receiver 3. And his targets and his stats from last year were 105 targets, 54 catches, 627 yards, and 7 touchdowns. And fun fact, my dynasty team to all last season, I was basically trying to piece lineups together week by week, just trying to make it work, just due to the fact that I had some injuries along the way. And so whenever I played Curtis Samuel, I think he scored a touchdown. I want to say I started him 7 times last season because I had to, more than anything else. And I think he came through nearly every single time, so that was really fun for me. But regardless, with Curtis Samuel, there's been a lot of rumors that they might trade him, and I don't know why they would, because Curtis Samuel is a super talented wide receiver. And last season, if you were to look at total air yards thrown to, Curtis Samuel and Mike Evans were 1 and 2. They were both guys who played unbelievably well and just didn't get the ball, or their quarterbacks threw them balls that were basically uncatchable. So Curtis Samuel has shown the ability to blow by cornerbacks and safeties, but all last season he just never got catchable passes, and that killed me, not only as a Curtis Samuel owner, but also as a Panthers fan, because it was infuriating to watch week after week. But Curtis Samuel is probably a better wide receiver than Robby Anderson. I think Curtis Samuel you can do a little bit more with. You can have him as that X receiver, and not only can he run straight and blow by guys, but he can also hit guys with footwork and just route running as well. But again, I don't know if this offense is tailored to Curtis Samuel's play style, because Curtis Samuel is a guy who can just beat you deep, and if Bridgewater doesn't throw deep, then what are you supposed to do? So I have Curtis Samuel ranked at wide receiver 56, and the reason why he's lower than Robby Anderson for me is because I don't understand why they were to bring in Robby Anderson if he kind of fills that same role as Curtis Samuel. So that was one of those things where I'll put these guys kind of similarly, kind of in the same ballpark, but that's just because they play the same play style, and why would they bring one guy in if they were high on the other? So in all honesty, I probably should move Curtis Samuel up to wide receiver 54 instead of 56 and just swap the two. But regardless, the ADP is still kind of in agreement with me there. His wide receiver ADP is wide receiver 58 and going in the 13th round. So you are getting him towards the back end of your drafts as well. And some guys who he's going around are Preston Williams, N'Keal Harry, Justin Jefferson, Michael Pittman Jr., John Ross, Jalen Reagor, Larry Fitzgerald, Paris Campbell, D.D. Westbrook, Brandon Ayuk, and Hunter Renfrow. Of that list, I'd probably put Curtis Samuel in the upper echelon of dart throws there. You do have some guys where you just don't know what you're going to get as far as just inconsistencies with John Ross, Paris Campbell, who knows, D.D. Westbrook has a low floor, and so does Larry Fitzgerald. But if you were to ask me that question of who would you rather have, Curtis Samuel or Preston Williams, I think that's an interesting conversation. N'Keal Harry or Curtis Samuel, that's an interesting conversation. Henry Ruggs or Curtis Samuel, that's an interesting conversation. So ultimately, the main theme of this video is I would rather not use a draft pick on a Panthers player, on a Panthers wide receiver per se, and just pick them up off the waiver wire because they're probably going to be there later on in the season? Or would I rather use a late round pick on them now? The reason why I lean towards just grabbing them off of waivers is because I think this offense is going to take some time to develop because of the fact that we aren't getting preseason games this year, and they're going to have to kind of learn and adjust on the fly. So those first 3 weeks might be a bit of a rocky road where I'm not comfortable starting either Robby Anderson or Curtis Samuel. I want to see how that shakes out instead of just grabbing one and kind of throwing that dart and knowing that I have a chance of being wrong on a player like that. Just because it's one thing to be wrong on a dart throw. Like, let's just say it's one thing to be wrong on Jalen Reagor, who I picked who I drafted in the mock draft this morning. It's one thing to be wrong on Jalen Reagor because of the fact that he is a rookie and there are other pieces within that offense, and you just have a lot of upside there. I don't know if the upside for Curtis Samuel or Robby Anderson is high enough to where I want to throw that dart in their direction, knowing that I have a 50-50 shot of it's going to be one of them, and I'm just not willing to take that risk in the end. All right, let's wrap this thing up with the guy that maybe no one is talking about besides me. And the reason why nobody is talking about them, because I don't think anybody realizes the amount of targets available in this offense, and that is Ian Thomas. Greg Olsen is gone. Greg Olsen was old. Greg Olsen was also very, very good last season despite the bad quarterback play. So now steps in Ian Thomas, who's been a guy that the Panthers have kind of been grooming. Granted, it was the last regime for the past several years or so. I don't want to talk about the 2019 finish or the adjusted score because it doesn't matter, because look at how those numbers shake out. But what I do want to talk about is the weekly finishes, and that's where he had one game as a tight end 1, one game as a tight end 2, and a few games in that tight end 3 range, as well as let's talk about the 2019 stats where he had 30 targets, 16 catches, 136 yards, and a touchdown. Ian Thomas, to me, is a guy that maybe it's not this year, it's next year where the step forward really comes. But I do think there is potential because of the amount of targets that Greg Olsen had last year to where he can step in and fill that void. So I'm going to pull the exact number up right now. Yeah, Greg Olsen last season had 82 targets. And granted, Ian Thomas did catch just over 50% of the balls that were thrown his way last year, but ultimately it comes down to bad quarterback play, probably for the reason why that number is so low. But even still, if Ian Thomas sees 83 targets and catches 45 passes, like, I'm totally cool with that. That's going to put him probably in that tight end 2 range. And maybe you don't start him, but he is probably a guy that you could stream a few times each season. I do have Ian Thomas ranked at tight end 23, but I think there's a world where he finishes in the top 15 just due to the amount of targets he's going to be getting out of nowhere. And I don't think people fully realize the hole that is left in this Carolina Panthers offense with Greg Olsen leaving. His ADP doesn't even pop up in Fantasy Football Calculator. So I just have him listed at tight end 23 plus. I don't have the exact number for you, so basically means you can get him for free in your draft if you wanted to wait till like the last round to grab a tight end. Again, I don't know what this Panthers offense is going to look like. There are only 2 guarantees that I know. The 2 guarantees are, 1, Christian McCaffrey should absolutely be the number 1 overall pick, and number 2, DJ Moore is going to finish as a middle wide receiver 2. But probably has a very good chance of finishing closer to a wide receiver 1. And then everything else, we just have to see where the pieces fall, where they may, how the cookie crumbles. This is a brand new team, essentially. New quarterback, new head coach, new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. But that actually brings me to a very, very good point that I forgot to mention at the top. This team is going to have to throw the ball a ton, because their defense is Swiss cheese this season. They drafted 7 rookies with their 7 defensive players with their 7 draft picks this offseason. They didn't touch their offense. Their defense was that bad that they had to focus every single one of their draft picks towards that side of the ball. And you are in a division where you are facing Drew Brees twice a year, Matt Ryan twice a year, and Tom Brady twice a year. So no matter what, at a minimum, you are going to be in a shootout 6 different times, or you're going to get boat raced. And because of that, that's why I like this offense maybe more than other people do. Yes, there's a wide range of outcomes here, but I lean towards the sides of where good things are going to happen, even if my rankings don't fully reflect that. Good things can happen here because they are forced to happen here. Not because of game script or game plan, but because of the game flow of each game that they are in. And I think that's pretty much it. So, once again, just want to reiterate, Teddy Bridgewater, if you want to take a late round flyer on, I have no issues with it. I just don't know what the fantasy expectation should ultimately be. Christian McCaffrey absolutely should be the first pick in your fantasy draft. DJ Moore, a middle wide receiver 2, high end or low end wide receiver 1. Robby Anderson and Curtis Samuel, if you want to take a dart throw on them, fine. I just don't know how their roles actually materialize in this offense. And then Ian Thomas, probably not this year, but just a guy that I wanted to talk about so I can get in on him early and have that on my resume. So probably not this year, but there is a chance that it does happen. If you're in a tight end premium league, maybe you play 2 tight ends, or if you just need an extra tight end on your bench, just in case you do have an injury-prone guy like Zach Ertz and you want to fill that slot in, just as a security blanket, Ian Thomas may be that person for you. Other than that, I think that's going to cover it for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. We try to do this thing 2 times a day, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also follow me on all social media networks at FFVulture. Check out the website, ffvulture.com, and text me up this way. And text me 330-302-1554. Any kind of fantasy football advice or question that you need answered or a discussion that you want to have, let's have it over there. I'm really looking forward to using that platform more and more. And that's it. I'll see you back here tomorrow as we preview the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I think we might do, let's see. And we're also going to do the best, no, what are we going to do tomorrow? We're also going to do how to handle fantasy football this season during COVID-19, because that's going to be a hot topic for a lot of different leagues. And I have some thoughts on how to make your league as safe as possible. So with that, I'll see you back here tomorrow for those 2 videos. Remember, people come and go, but fantasy championships are forever. Peace.